Okay, so tonight I have the pleasure to be here with Annie Hugh, a student at Osgood Hall Law School at York University. For anyone who doesn't know, that's located in Toronto. And Annie, if you wanted to introduce yourself, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, sure. So, as Maddie mentioned, my name is Annie, and I just finished my first year of law school at Osgood Hall Law School, located in Toronto, Ontario. Um, I don't know where the audience is tuning in from, but I'm assuming many people are from the States. So I'm here to sort of give a perspective on, I won't say Canadian law schools because I only can really speak to Osgood in depth, but I did apply to a few schools in law schools in Canada. So in terms of the application process, I can maybe speak about that.
That's great. I'm particularly excited because I'm currently at the University of Ottawa, and I will be applying to York, among other Canadian law schools. So this is great for me to be able to chat with you about all that, as well as other
Okay.
students, because I know there are a few Canadians. Um, I'd like to start off just by asking you why you chose Osgood Law School. I'm assuming you applied to a few. Maybe if there were some factors that drew you there and what those were.
For sure. So I did apply to a few Canadian law schools, mostly in Ontario. I also applied to University of Alberta. But what really drew me to Osgood is its clinical programs. So in university, a lot of my friends went off to universities and they did co-op programs, but the program that I did at U of T didn't really have co-op. And I was seeing those friends, transforming their classroom knowledge into actual practical work experience. And I really wish I had that in university. So I thought, in law school, what is the point of law school for me? It's to practice law later on. So I wanted to really get that hands-on experience as soon as possible. So I'm not just going into the workforce after law school without any practical experience. And Osgood, when I was doing my research for law schools, Osgood has this program called Community Legal Aid Services Program, and they take first year law students as caseworkers and volunteers. And if you speak another language, you can also interpret for clients. So the program sort of focuses on helping community that it's underprivileged and community that needs legal help but cannot necessarily afford legal services. So it's very client facing and you don't feel like you're just in the books all day. You can actually, as a student caseworker, you do some research for the files. And as a division leader, which I'm now working as community legal services as a division leader, you can interact with clients directly and sort of take the lead on the file, of course, under the supervision of a review counsel. So going back to answering your question, the clinical program is one of the biggest factors that drew me to Osgood. And of course, it was also located in Toronto, and I also live like an hour and a bit away from Toronto. So it's also closer to home as well. And in the future, I would preferably like to stay within like the GTA area in terms of work. So I just thought it made the most sense to choose a school that is nearby.
That's amazing. Like, I think that's so cool and just such a great opportunity to be able to participate in that in your first year and kind of get like hands on right away. And I didn't even really know that they did that. So that's really great to know. And if you don't mind, I kind of want to take a step back and just start at your LSAT journey, I guess. So how was the process of studying for the LSAT for you and writing the LSAT?
The process, I would say, I was the sort of person who didn't understand the LSAT right away. So it was a bit of a adjustment for me. I know some of my peers, they took the cold diagnostic, they scored like high 150s, low 160s. That wasn't me. The LSAT was really hard for me, especially I think as someone whose second language, like English is their second language, it made it more difficult because a lot of LSAT, as you probably know, is testing, you know, the way you comprehend um, like a scientific paragraph and humanities paragraph and some of those vocabularies you've never really seen in your life before. So for me, it was something I really needed practice. But one of the things I found really helpful for me was to really, um, pick out what specific things I'm struggling with, or different question types, or different like themes. So, for example, I was really weak on the scientific passages. I would focus on those passages. And one of the things I did well is, I allocated enough time for myself to study for the LSAT, because after taking that cold diagnostic, I was like, I really just need the time to digest, and it's not something that I want to cram for. So I allocated about 6 months to 8 months just for the LSAT. And I had the luxury of doing so because I took a year off after university. So I used that year to just focus on my LSAT and my law school application. So I wasn't doing it with school because that was just, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to put myself through that stress. So I did that. And going back to the question types, I just honed in on the question type that I was weak on, and I drilled those question types. But I also made sure that I didn't study 8 to 9 hours every day, because I feel like you do need to have a life outside of LSAT, because LSAT is something that can be really draining. And for people who don't grasp it right away, it can be especially draining and exhausting. So I really like to just focus for 2 3 hours and then go do something that is completely different than the LSAT, come back and then do some more. And then I like to take Sundays off.
Yeah, like I'm honestly in the same boat as you. Like, I am studying right now and writing in a couple more months, but I wasn't the person either that just kind of sat down and understood right away.
Mhm.
What was your undergrad in? Just because I know that mine isn't very helpful for this sort of thing. And like, it's just totally different.
Mine, I did a double major in criminology and music, and I did a minor in sociology. So I don't know if that's necessarily helpful per se, but I think criminology and sociology prepared me for the amount of reading. So when I saw the passages in reading comprehension, I wasn't overwhelmed by the amount of stuff I had to read. But in terms of like the vocabularies, that's a completely different story. I definitely did feel more comfortable with, the social science passages, the humanities passages, rather than, sorry, the scientific passages. Um, so to sort of improve on that, I was researching some ways that, you could get familiarized with those scientific passages. And a lot of the people were suggesting, to read magazines like National Geographic, or like the New York Times, or just different magazines like that. So that's what I did. I think during the time I was studying, there was like a first time subscription for $12, and you get like, a year worth of magazines. So I did that, and I think that kind of paid off in the end.
Yeah, it sounds like it's somewhere that could actually help you with that sort of thing. I've done that as well. And you were a part of LSAT Unplugged as well. Is that correct? When you were studying,
Yeah.
were you in the course for the full 6 months, or was it something that you decided to join after when you were struggling? Like, how did that work for you?
So for me, it was less of a course. It was more, I did self-studying, so I didn't really take any formal courses or programs. But at some point I reached a score and I couldn't increase it, and I was stuck there for the longest time. So I was researching, stuff that I could pick up and free resources and stuff like that. And I think at the time, it was during when LSAT had 7Sage take down all of their logic game videos that were for free. And as someone who was studying, it was really frustrating because I heavily relied on that. But then after that, I found LSAT Unplugged. I think Steve had some like explanations of logic games video that was like for free that you could access. So that's sort of when I started looking into Lsat Unplugged. And then after that, I subsequently found the podcasts and I just listened to them, and I found that to be really helpful because I'm someone who likes to learn by doing and also listening. So no formal programs with Lsat Unplugged, but more so just resources here and there.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. That's how I started as well. But I have written the LSAT already, and now I'm like digging in a little bit deeper. But yeah, I'm excited to be past that and be in your position where I'm like when I was studying.
For
So
sure.
yeah, moving on to kind of the admissions process. Do you just mind explaining how admissions works? Here in Canada or Ontario, just for our non-Canadian viewers.
Yeah, so obviously I can't speak too much about outside Canada because I didn't apply to the States, so I don't have a solid comparison. But I know just from hearing friends applying to the States, I think they go through something called CAS through LSAC, and it's sort of like the central system that distributes your grade report and from undergrad and reference letters and stuff like that. And I think you have to pay a certain fee to access a CAS. So that's sort of what happens with the schools in the States. But in Canada, you actually go through a central system, and it's called OLSAS. So it kind of functions like CAS, except there's no fee that you need to pay to LSAC. So I know when students were applying to Canadian law schools, because they're both going through LSAC for LSAT, they were sort of confused because they're like, do I need to sign up for CAS if I want to apply to Canadian law schools? The answer is no, you don't need to pay that CAS, because if you're not applying to the States, because that would be a waste of money just because we go through OLSAS and not CAS. In terms of the other, I don't know how CAS works, but when you submit your reference letters for Canadian law schools, I think that's Ontario law schools that I'm talking about. OLSAS is for Ontario law schools. I think I should specify that, not all Canadian law schools. So through OLSAS, you would get your references to submit a letter directly to OLSAS, and then they'll distribute your reference letter to all the Ontario law schools that you've applied for. And if I remember correctly, the deadline for most Ontario schools is November 1st. And for viewers who are interested in University of British Columbia, don't quote me on this, but I think their deadline's a bit later, so December 1st. But for like University of British Columbia or University of Alberta or any other outside Ontario universities or law schools, you would need to go through their website to apply, so not through OLSAS. So OLSAS again is for just Ontario law schools.
It's definitely a little confusing in that sense. Like I know that like all the Ontario schools want to go through OLSAS, but then when you apply outside of Ontario, it's totally different. It's confusing. And you said you applied to University of Alberta. So did you obviously would have had to apply directly to them and then just do your OLSAS application for your Ontario law schools?
Yeah.
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 Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so I did that through my own. So I would submit my personal statement not through OLSAS for Alberta. I would email my personal statement to admissions in Alberta, and I believe I would just give them the contact information of my references if they required one, and then they would reach out to the references themselves. So nothing with University of Alberta was through OLSAS at all.
Okay, that's actually interesting how different it really is.
Yeah.
And actually, about the personal statement, when you wrote yours, were you kind of confident in what you wanted to write about and the topic you chose, or was it something that you kind of had to struggle with and rewrite or remold, or maybe even write a few? Like I've thought about that. How was that for you?
Not to scare anybody, but I spend a long time on my personal statement just because that is something I feel I have complete control over, whereas my grades and my LSAT, yes, I do have some sort of control over, but by the time I'm writing my personal statement, I was already through both processes. I was done undergrad and I had my LSAT score. So I thought, personal statement is where I can really make myself stand out amongst a bunch of other applicants. So I think by the end, I had around 6 or 7 drafts just because I kept changing, what I wanted to write about. Because let's face it, it's really hard because a lot of schools, I think American schools or Canadian schools, they ask for 2-page personal statement at the most. So let's pretend I was like 20, 21 when I applied to law school. You're really trying to summarize the 21 years of your life into 2 pages. And of course, you're going to struggle because, everyone has so much to offer and everyone has different experiences. And it's really hard to just summarize everything into 2 pages. And in the beginning, I made the mistake of trying to cram as much as possible, try and cram different stories, try and cram the different experiences. But then in the end, when I had people proofread it and edit it, people were saying that it seemed a little scattered. I didn't have a central focus. So what I would suggest is pick 1 or 2 highlight of, what you want to highlight to admissions, and then elaborate on those things as opposed to just talking about 5, 6 different experiences and then talking about them not too much in depth, because at the end of the day, they want to hear something that, you can talk a lot about and what you got out of those experiences. So that's sort of the approach I took. Of course, when I was applying to law school, I felt very overwhelmed because I was like, I have to write 7, 8 different personal statements for each law school. And at the end of the day, I kept, generally everything was the same. But I would research different schools and then change sort of the last paragraph of why you want to go to their school. So I would suggest when you're working on your personal statement, just do research on different schools and then find, a point or two that really resonates with you and why you want to go to their school. So if you structure it that way, you shouldn't have to change your personal statement significantly from school to school.
Well, yeah, that's great advice because that's actually what I was going to ask is how much you changed. But it makes sense that, you shouldn't have to rewrite it because at that point, it kind of seems like you're changing a little bit too much for the school you want to go to.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
so you kind of just would do some research and you said put that as your like kind of a last paragraph thing and just find something special about that school and kind of connect it that way.
Yeah, yeah. And I did that because, admissions, they read thousands and thousands of personal statement and they can really tell when you're being genuine versus when you're not. Um, so of course I've gotten the comment or, the suggestion of making sure that you don't write to say University of Toronto, but in your letter you forgot to change something and it actually says, University of Western Ontario. So of course put the correct school in your personal statement, but I think, that's very fundamental. Like that is something that should be done without saying. But I think that extra step would just to do your own research on the school and really tell them, being able to say, hey, this is something that your school offers and I'm really passionate about. And I want to go to your school because of this program or because of this professor, or because of this professor's research interest.
That's really great advice. Thank you for that. I'm like, oh, I gotta write that down for in a couple, when I'm starting to apply. So kind of shifting gears a little bit kind into law school itself. Like, I think a lot of students are wondering, first of all, you did your first year in the pandemic in Toronto, how did the pandemic affect your schooling?
It was very different for me because when I like I said, I took a year off undergrad. So by the time I graduated, everything was still in person. So a lot of my peers had already experienced that taste of virtual learning from undergrad if they're going straight into law school. But for me, it was completely different. And I've never experienced something like that before. And I remember, you know, receiving my acceptance, and I was telling my parents, I was telling my friends, should I defer? Is it a good idea to defer because I don't want to do my first year of law school online? And by then it was 2020, and it was the beginning of 2020, or yeah, it was beginning of 2020. And they're like, you don't know how long this pandemic is going to last, and look where we are now. Like, we're still sort of in a pandemic, even though things are getting better. So I'm glad I made the decision of going through with it and not deferring, because I feel like by deferring, I would still be sort of stuck in the same situation. And at the end of the day, what really convinced me is everyone who was going into first year was in the same boat. So it's not like I'm technically missing out or I'm alone in this virtual journey of law school. Um, and I try to just think on the positive side, because obviously virtual learning can be very isolating at times, but I think it also gave me, the freedom to participate in more extracurriculars. Because in person, you would have to run from one meeting to another, and maybe one is in downtown, and maybe the other one is I don't know where. So it would obviously add to your commuting and travel time. Whereas online, all the meetings are virtual. So I made use of that, and I participated in more, volunteering stuff and extracurriculars that I'm actually passionate about. So instead of feeling isolated in my studies, I felt like I actually had a good experience because I was able to reach out to different people, even upper years, through those extracurricular opportunities, um, to just enrich my first year experience. Because one thing I found with first year, and I think this goes with all the law schools, first year, your schedule is pretty much set. They give you your schedule. You don't really pick your courses because you're taking fundamental courses. So they divide you into sections. So at Osgood, we have 4 different sections for first year. And because you're taking every course together with your section pretty much feels like the only people you're interacting with. So you can't really get to know people from other sections unless you participate in like social events, extracurricular activities where, they sort of mix the sections up and people are meeting all kinds of different people. And I find that is really good in terms of networking as well, because networking is one of the most important things in law school as well, where you're, talking to professionals, you're talking to upper years, and you're talking to professors, and those can really open you up to a lot more opportunities, rather than if you just stayed in, if you didn't really reach out and didn't really talk to a lot of people. Yeah, so I found that a lot of my experiences come from those connections and networking, and I think being online kind of helped with that, as weird as that sounds. um yeah, in terms of the downside, I feel that you have to be more intentional in connecting with people. So there's no more, you run into someone in the hallway and strike up a conversation, say, hey, do you want to grab a coffee? Do you want to talk about this? Do you want to study together later? It's more so, hey, I've made a Zoom link for 6 p.m. Yeah, and at 6 p.m. everyone logs into Zoom and to say hi, and then by 7 p.m. everyone gets tired of Zoom and then say, you know what, we're gonna call it a night. But as long as you make the effort, I feel like connecting with people is also still possible. It's not like it's impossible.
Yeah, that's great to hear that you were still able to have the experience of, networking and forming relationships with other students and things like that. And I'm sure obviously it's not like the first year law school like that you expected, but I'm glad to hear that it was like still a good experience, and that you went like and decided to go in it, because that's something I thought about too, is what you would do in that situation. Um, so at Osgood, I know you said in your first year, your classes are kind of set and you're just put into sections. As you move into your upper years, are there focus areas or streams that you can choose to study within law? Because I know some universities have a lot, some don't have as many. What's it like at Osgood for that?
Osgood does offer certain like specializations that you can choose when you get to upper years, and they sort of in the syllabus they list, if you want to concentrate in environmental law, they'll sort of say you need to take this course, and this course to fulfill, your concentration in environmental law. This is very optional. A lot of people go into law school knowing what they're interested in, and they stay, interested in that area, which is great. Knowing what you want to do early on is always great. However, most people in law school end up changing either what they want to do. So, for example, a friend of mine went into law school wanting to do criminal law, took first year criminal law, realized it wasn't his cup of tea. So then, he took bankruptcy and thought, this is so interesting, and ended up going to corporate. So I've gotten the advice of, if you're not at least 95% to 100% sure of the area you want to go into, maybe keep your options open, because you don't have to do specializations after all. Like, not doing specialization is not a bad thing. It just means you're leaving your options open and exploring different type of courses. So that's what I plan to do, because I still can't tell you, I still can't pinpoint that one area of law that I'm interested in, because I feel like I'm still exploring. So yeah, I plan on doing that and keeping my options open. But specializations are great for people who know what they want to do.
So when you don't specialize, do they just give you, like, you have courses that kind of touch on everything? Is that how it works, or is it more just general all around?
So concentrations only happen starting second year. Like, first year, everyone's taking the same course. You don't have the option to specialize in anything going into law school. So starting second year, there are a variety of courses you can pick from. So it's no longer like contracts law. You can take courses like bankruptcy law, insolvency, I'm trying to think of them, securities regulation. So a lot of things that are under the contracts umbrella and corporate umbrella, but they're more concentrated. But taking those courses doesn't mean you have to specialize in anything. If you want to specialize in anything, like declare formally that you're specializing in anything, then they'll give you a list of courses and say, those are courses that you have to take to fulfill your specialization. But if you're not specializing in anything, that doesn't stop you from taking the courses that people specializing are able to take. I don't know if that made sense.
No, yeah, it definitely makes sense. Like, I guess what I was just kind of curious about is, like, so you choose not to take a specialization, but you can still, let's say you want to take an environmental law kind of one or a corporate one, you can still pick those courses and learn.
Mm-hmm.
You just wouldn't, I guess, graduate with that technical specialization. Is that
Exactly.
correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and you said, like, you're going into your second year, you're just going to keep your options open and kind of take what you're interested in.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I think that's probably what I would end up doing, because I'd be like, I'd want to learn it all, but yeah. So
yeah, and another
switching,
good thing about doing
all
that,
good.
at least from my personal standpoint, is you have to go to the bar exam, and bar exam tests a lot of different things. They test real estate, they test tax, and they test I think business law and criminal law, criminal procedure. So for me, it's kind of like, if I can prepare myself for the bar exam by taking those courses beforehand, then I want to do that, as opposed to just studying on my own before the bar exam and trying to cram everything myself.
Yeah,
So.
that's a very good point. Like, I didn't even think about that. Definitely something to consider when I get to that point.
For sure.
So switching gears a little bit, Annie, I know you are a co-founder of a blog. Could you explain, about your blog, how it started, why you started it, a little bit about it for us?
Yeah, sure. So kind of ties into the reason why I'm here today is because, as a first generation law student, my parents didn't go to law school. None of my relatives went to law school. So law is sort of the first, I'm sort of the first person to pursue law in either like my immediate and distant family. Um, and my parents are also immigrants as well. So they don't have a lot of connections in Canada. They don't know a lot of people in Canada. Um, and just, watching them when I like growing up, I would watch them, and sometimes my parents would struggle with like having the confidence to go out themselves because say, if my dad was driving and for example, he gets pulled over, he would be scared because he doesn't really know how to communicate with, legal authorities in English. And just like that lack of confidence. And if they got into, say, landlord and tenant matters and have like problems with the rental place, they would not be comfortable speaking up and just defending themselves. And this is not only with my parents as well. I see other parents, immigrant parents, struggling with the same thing. So when I was little, I sort of said, okay, I'm going to grow up and I'm going to help those, communities somehow. So that's sort of like the backstory of it. And then when I was applying to law school, of course, I didn't really have a lot of people to connect with, and to, you know, get a sense of what being a lawyer is like. So what I resorted to doing was I searched up Osgood students on LinkedIn, searched up University of Toronto law students from LinkedIn, and searched up, criminal lawyers on LinkedIn, and I would cold message them. And for me, I identify as an introvert, and this is a very uncomfortable process for me. I don't like cold emailing people, because if they don't reply, I take it personally. And of course, I can't be the only one that feels like this. So um, after going through this very daunting process, I really wanted to help people who are in a similar situation and don't have any people to reach out to because they feel scared or they don't know anyone. So the summer before law school, I reached out to a friend who is also at Osgood with me, and we met virtually. Funny enough, we've never met in person because everything is virtual. And we sort of had the same passion of helping pre-law students as well as, current law students. So we founded this blog together, and we documented everything from our experiences with the LSAT, our experiences with law school applications, how to ask for references and stuff like that. And we wrote posts on it, just wanting to help people who are going through the process and feel like they don't have anyone to talk to. And I know like law school applications is a very lonely process, especially during a pandemic. And I sort of had the benefit of going to club fairs and law school fairs in person when I was in undergrad. But I know with the pandemic, it's really hard to do that. And you really have to look and dig for those events, especially, being online, you really have to dig for those things. And on top of that, it can be very frustrating and tiring of sitting on Zoom every day. So that's sort of our objective, to use those posts to help people. So people feel comfortable reaching out to us as well because we're going through the same process. And at that time, the law school application process was still sort of fresh in our mind. So we wanted to do that.
That's amazing. I love, the reason why you decided to do that for people, in similar situations as you, but also help people, just kind of get comfortable in that process. You guys are still posting now, or was it something that you were kind of doing as an admissions LSAT sort of thing?
So, because first year was kind of overwhelming, and I'm sure a lot of people can understand, we sort of slowed down during the summer. I remember we were taking turns, like my friend and I were taking turns posting every week, because we also realized summer is when people are starting to get their applications together. So we wanted to get them out before law school. And our original plan was to document our journey in law school so people can see what it's like in law school. But given how busy law school was first year, I kind of slowed down. But I'm hoping this summer we can start it back up and carry through that, and write about our experiences in first year that we can share with the incoming 1Ls or people who are thinking about applying to law schools as well.
Yeah, that's totally understandable. Like on top of, your first year at law school in a pandemic trying to do this. But yeah,
Mhm.
I really love that whole idea of, just trying to find a way to help other people. Did this help you meet fellow students, or like did people reach out to you, and did you meet people that way?
Yeah, actually, a lot of students felt, they felt comfortable reaching out to us, which is what we love to see because this was like the whole reason why we did it. Um, and we also have an account on Instagram, and I find that students are more keen to reach out on Instagram for whatever reason. But yeah, we did have a lot of students reach out, and a lot of students are very keen. They reach out when they're in second year of undergrad, which I think is great when they're, preparing for the process early. Just because this can be a really long process and it can be, you know, good to talk to people beforehand to even understand whether you are interested in going down this path or not.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm definitely gonna find your blog, and I'll probably reach out as well because I think that's such a cool idea. But
Amazing.
moving on a little bit, I know that you're also, an active participant in the undergrad moot and mock trial communities. Could you
Mhm.
explain like what your role is and how you got into this a little bit?
Yeah, so in undergrad, I of course wanted to look for any opportunities that's remotely law related. So I joined the Pre Law Society, the University of Toronto Pre Law Society, I think starting in the end of first year. And I was just sort of like a general member because I wanted to see what they do before getting into it. And I participated in the first University of Toronto mock trial competition. And it was a lot of fun. I didn't really do mock trials in high school, but I took a law course in high school. I didn't do mock trials. So mock trials is a very new thing to me, but I had a lot of fun. Um, it was, I think, a group of six, and two of us got to be lawyers, and the other four got to be witnesses, and we got to like direct and cross examine like all the witnesses, and it was really fun. So then after that, I think starting in second year, I applied to be the mock trial director, because I just really wanted to organize that mock trial and to get the experience as well. Um, and so in second year, my role was the mock trial director within the University of Pre Law Society, where we invited different schools, different universities to participate in the competition. And we also looked for cases um, to draft and just to come up with a case for the competition. And after that, so during undergrad, I wanted to get into mooting as well because there was also like a mooting division as well, and on top of the mock trial division. I wanted to get into mooting, but I've heard that mooting is a lot of work, and I just didn't find it feasible on top of organizing mock trials and stuff like that on top of school as well, because I was taking, I think, a full course load. So after university, after I think the summer before law school, I participated in my first moot. It's called the Lions Cup Moot. It's, I think, organized under York University. And it was the summer, and it was great because I didn't have school, and it was already, I got accepted to law school. It was great. And I focused on mooting, and that was really fun. It was a different experience than mock trials. I know some people might be wondering what the difference is between moots and mock trials, because I know I was confused going in. But mock trial is sort of, you're examining the evidence and you're arguing, whether this evidence can be admitted or not. Whereas mooting, you're sort of arguing like the the law. So think of it like when you're going to the Supreme Court of Canada, you're arguing whether this law is constitutional. So you're not really focused on the evidence. So I think mooting is definitely, in my opinion, harder, but it's more fun because you get to have a conversation with the judge. Whereas in mock trial, you're mostly just presenting your case. And then after that, if the judge had any questions, they would ask you. So that after that, I enjoyed both. And in law school, I continued to do moots as well. But I wanted to give back to the undergrad mooting and mock trial and mooting community. So I served as a coach, I think, for mock trial, University of Mississauga mock trial. And sometimes I would judge moots as well. I think I did one for Lions as well as McMasters and Lauriers. And just, being on the other side of things is very interesting because, last year you were a competitor and now you're going back as a judge and you see, those competitors being super nervous and you're remembering, I was also super nervous when I'm in their shoes. And it just gives you a complete different perspective. And I think, it's really fun to see those students being interested in taking on those things while in undergrad, and you can give them your feedback. And yeah, so it's overall just a very rewarding experience for me, because being able to help students and not be the lawyer in the room, but still as someone who can give their feedback, it just makes them seem like a little closer to you because you were in their shoes just literally a year ago. So
Yeah, that sounds like such a great opportunity. And it also kind of sounds like, have you found that, doing those trials has prepared you in a way for anything within law school?
believe it or not, in undergrad, at the start of undergrad, I didn't want to do any public speaking at all, even though I was interested in law. And that was just one thing that was missing for me because I kept thinking, I'm interested in law and those TV shows, all you see is lawyers arguing in court. How am I going to go into law if I'm not comfortable with public speaking? So that's sort of like the initial reason why I wanted to give mock trials a try, because you get to do it with like 5 other people on your on your team, so it's less daunting that way. And through those experience, I sort of found my voice, and I didn't think it was as intimidating as I thought. All the judges were really nice, and they realized it's an undergrad experience, so all of them were very encouraging. Very rarely I had judges, you know, talking very harshly, if at all. So I think participating in those moods, especially in undergrad, has actually prepared me because I feel like participating in those things in undergrad is very low stake, and it sort of gives you that safety net. If you mess up or something, people are still very encouraging because they understand that a lot of them are doing this for the first time. And even judging now, like, we're cognizant of students who are participating for the first time. They're a little nervous. You still want to be encouraging, right? Because it's not like those students don't know how to move or don't know how to do mock trials. It's just the nerves. And being encouraging can really go a long way. And I'm really thankful that the judges I had in the past were very encouraging that way. And I think that's part of the reason why I'm more comfortable with public speaking today.
Yeah, that's amazing. It kind of just, it sounds like at that point all the pieces like fell together because that was the one thing you were concerned about. And that's like, it's great that you were able to kind of solidify it at that point. So I have one more question kind of about what you've done throughout. So you work for the Community Legal Aid Services Program at Osgood, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Could you kind of explain, like what do there and what your role is and kind of how it works and how that ties into your law school education?
Yeah, so I mentioned like briefly about this in the beginning. In
Mhm.
1L, I sort of applied to be the caseworker and interpreter because I speak Mandarin. I was able to interpret for some of the Mandarin speaking clients that were applying for our services. So that's sort of the capacity that I was in the legal aid clinic for in first year. And after first year, we have the opportunity of applying as what is called a division leader, like a student division leader. And I think we have three divisions. So there's administrative law division, there's criminal law division, there's immigration law division. So the clinic helps with those three like related areas of law. And I'm currently the division leader for administrative law division. And believe it or not, when I was first in administrative law, I was kind of like, what the heck is administrative law? I didn't know what administrative law is because, criminal immigration is sort of self explanatory. And so I remember Googling what is administrative law. But we basically do social assistance, like Ontario Disability Benefit Appeals, um, and we do like landlord and tenant matters. We do academic honesty offenses, and just yeah, I think stuff like that. Human rights issues as well. So it's a big umbrella, and I think that's great because it exposes you to a lot of different things um, under administrative law. And I think a lot of those things are very practical. As a student, you might be renting places and you might have friends who are renting places. And, like the typical question you get as a law student is, can you go over this contract with me and see if everything makes sense? And of course, we aren't allowed to give legal advice as a student, but I think being exposed to these things can at least where to look when you're having issues with, say, like your landlord and tenant matter. Where to refer people to, and you're familiar with the process, like the social assistance application process and stuff like that, and like the Canadian pension application process. And in the clinic, we also get like training from people who are working there. Then they come in and do the training for us, and we get all kinds of different training. So a few days ago, we did training that told that sort of informed us how to work with clients who's had trauma, and how to work with clients who are who were abused and stuff like that. So I think a lot of those trainings, yes, it's good for law school and it's good for legal work, but those things for me go beyond just law school and the practice of law, because as like a human being, like of course you sometimes you are faced with those problems, and you have friends coming to you with those problems, and it will tell you how to deal with these problems. In terms of the workload, I handle about 6 to 9 clients at a time. So of course we have like files opening and closing all the time. So 6 to 9 is sort of the average number. And as I mentioned before, we're sort of solely responsible for those clients. So we would call and check up on them. From to accepting their file to closing their file, we would sort of work with them and say if they needed representation at the landlord and tenant board regarding their application. If we accept their case, then we would be the ones who are representing them at the landlord and tenant board. And as a student, of course, that was a little daunting at first, because as a student, you're sort of walking in, you're like, do I know what I'm doing? Am I going to win their case? Are they going to get evicted because of me? And it just seemed like it's very high stake. But the great thing is you're always working under review counsel. So a supervising lawyer essentially, and they will accompany you when you're going to hearings. So you don't have to really worry about that. Just do your preparation, and if they see that you're getting off track, they're there to help you. So for me, that's better than just, going out after law school and not having that review counsel there for you, and, being expected to do everything when you're not a student anymore. Yeah, and I feel like if it wasn't for this program, I wouldn't be able to represent real clients at a board. Like, I can do mooting all I want, but I wouldn't be representing an actual, like, a client on an actual case. And for me, it's like we're making a difference in those clients' lives. And a lot of them have told me, thank you for doing this. We really need people like you guys who are helping the community, and helping people who can't afford legal services. And for me, that's very rewarding, because that's what we like. That's what I went to law school for, and I'm sure a lot of other people went to law school for as well.
Yeah, that sounds like a really incredible experience. And it's also so great to already get, hands-on experience with real clients and be handling real situations and also being in contact with lawyers to help you. Like all of that just sounds like something that, it's just a great opportunity. And when that's something that you actually want to do.
Mhm.
So my final big question for you, I guess, is if you could kind of give some advice to aspiring law students, whether it's school related, admission related, LSAT related, kind of anything that you wish maybe you knew going in, what would that be?
For me, in terms of the LSAT, for me, I I didn't have like a 4.0 GPA, and like my GPA was average. And it was like on the fence. So I looked at my GPA and I was like, this is not, I'm not gonna say this is not competitive, but it's also not super competitive. So when I was writing my LSAT, I felt like the LSAT was a make or break, and that put a lot of pressure on me. And I had to take the LSAT, just full disclosure, multiple times, because I just had that stress hang over my head. And I think it's really unhealthy to walk into the exam thinking, this test will determine my life or my career. But inevitably, I feel like a lot of students feel like that. But looking back, I think the LSAT is really just a check box that you have to tick in your law school applications, not a break, like make or break. Of course, a lot of schools might be more GPA LSAT heavy, but there are also a lot of great schools, and Osgood being one of them. They're very holistic in their like admission process. So don't let LSAT like hold you back. If you want to work on anything, focus on anything, and you feel like you have full control over, I would say really your personal statement, because they want to know who you are. They don't want to admit a bunch of people who have a similar, 4.0 GPA and like 167, 170 LSAT. They don't want to admit like every student that are like that. They want diversity in law school as well, because at the end of the day, when you're done law school, you're going into the community and you're representing all kinds of different clients, not all kinds of clients. So obviously they don't want the same type of people, because there's no diversity at the end of the day. So moral of the story is you own the LSAT doesn't own you. And that's like the saying I love to go by, because that sort of reassured me, the LSAT is not everything. It can be hard, but it's just something you have to get through. And after you get through that, it'll be great.
Well,
And
thank you
a
so
piece
much.
of
Like, I love that. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but like that's just such a good thing to hear right now when I'm studying and looking at applying, because it does feel really heavy, and I think a lot of
Yeah.
students can relate to that, but it's really not. It's not the biggest thing, I don't think.
Yeah, and like in terms of undergrad, I would really recommend just doing whatever you love. A lot of students sort of feel obligated if they're applying to law school. They think, I have to be on the debate team. I have to be on the pre-law society. That is not the case. You don't even have to take like criminology. You don't even have to take criminal justice to get into law school. I personally, I started music when I was 3 or 4, and I'm really attached to music, which is why I chose to do music as my double major, as part of my double major as well. So I participated in a lot of music extracurriculars, and I really enjoyed it. And on my cover letter, or sorry, on my personal statement, I was able to talk about that in depth and how that sort of intertwined with my interest in law. So think about something or do something. I think undergrad is the time to explore. So if you're interested in dance club, go join a dance club. If you're interested in, I don't know what's what's another thing that you can be interested in, but like varsity, join varsity, because there are a lot of transferable skills. And as I mentioned, law schools are looking for diverse applicants. So if you're able to speak to those experiences in depth and show that you have a genuine interest and you're committed to those things, I think that's better than anything else of trying to join a pre-law society when, you don't vibe with it.
Yeah, that's amazing because, students come from so many different backgrounds. Like, you're music and I'm in a science undergrad, and I'm always trying to think like, what do they think about that? Because it's not pre-law and it has nothing really to do with it. What do they think about someone who's coming from something totally different? But it's great to hear that, you can use that to your advantage. And at the end of the day, it's not the most important thing, right?
For sure, for sure. There are a lot of peers who are coming from engineering backgrounds, coming from like science backgrounds. One of them is a doctor. So definitely, everyone's coming from different walks of life, and don't be scared to explore different things. Don't feel obligated to, constrain yourself in law as early as undergrad.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Like, that among all the other things you said, I really appreciate talking with you. And there were so many, good tips and stuff and so much great advice, I think, for a lot of students. And it was also great to have someone in Canada talk about a Canadian law school, because that's, a change for me. So thanks again so much for talking with me. I really enjoyed it.
Of course, I'm really happy to be here, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. No worries.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.